Hello and welcome back to Sunday Vibes, everybody. It's myself and Mikey. Joe is sunning himself with Paul Scholes and Nicky Butt.
Crazy.
Did you see that in Portugal?
Yeah,
last night?
we'll get that up on screen right now, to be honest. Yeah.
Here he was, in a bar with the boys. Joe, you a little bit jealous of that?
Slightly. Joe, apparently Paul Scholes said, "I know you from somewhere," to him. Big lie, isn't it?
Who knows?
He probably does. He is a star, isn't he, Joe, these days?
And then Obba's in California, I believe.
Yeah.
On a random Californian trip. I think pre-Euros, just getting some sun. But Mikey and myself are here, and we're discussing all things Euros. Are you excited for the Euros, big man?
I am. Yeah, I am.
5 days to go.
Yeah. It's only 5 days to go at this point. Yeah, no, I am. It feels like I feel like the last season was so intense that this has really, really crept up. It's the first summer tournament in what feels like an age, isn't it? Like 3 years now. But then, weirdly enough, the last Euro still feels so kind of etched in my memory.
Your mind, yeah.
Fresh in my mind. I think it's just the heartbreak of the final, wasn't it, from an England perspective? But yeah, super, super buzzing for it. I'm actually going to be in Germany for a bit of it, which should be quite fun. I'm visiting a friend in Berlin. And I think the only game that's going on in Berlin is like Austria versus Poland, is it? I think. I think it's Austria-Poland. That's on the day that I get there, so I probably won't be able to get anywhere near that.
But you'll pick up some of the vibes.
Yeah, I might pick up some of the vibes. But then I am on my way home. I'm stopping by in Cologne on the in the period where England are playing Slovenia. So if anyone's got a cheap ticket plug, let me know. Otherwise, I am planning to link up with Football Daily royalty Sonny Snelling and try and catch it in the fan zone or something. Yes. But that should be quite fun.
Sonny Snelling now of TalkSport.
Yeah. I think he's in.
He's there for the whole time.
I think he's there for as long as England are in the tournament. So that is a pretty...
The whole time.
Yeah. So yeah, quite jealous of him, to be honest. I think that sounds like a great gig. But yeah, it should be fun, Dukes. Sorry, are you excited for it?
I'm buzzing. I always find it a little bit, not difficult. Difficult is probably the wrong word, but when Scotland are in a major tournament as well, I do have a fifth of my eye, one eye on them as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they go. But yeah, mega tournament for England. This is kind of feels like the final chance of the Southgate reign. Harry Kane coming off the season he's had. I mean, we'll get into it throughout the course of this episode, but it does feel like such a massive opportunity. Basically, this episode, as usual in sort of our pre-tournament prediction shows, we divide it into multiple categories. There's winners, there's player of the tournament, surprise star, all the usuals. Let's kick off with winners. Yeah. Who do you think, Michael McCubbin, is going to win Euro 2024? Because I think there are actually a number of pretty solid candidates.
There's a number of them, isn't there? I think we maybe run through a few before I give my take. I think France, are favourites. I think they are favourites. They have to be. They've made 3 of the last 4 finals in tournaments, stretching back to 2016. Since Didier Deschamps has been there. I think it was quarter-final at the 2014 World Cup, final of Euro 2016. Obviously won the World Cup, last 16 at the last Euros, and then the final of World Cup 2022. Like their record in tournaments is just so good, and it feels like the script is kind of followed every single time. They start a bit slow and then they come into their own a little bit around the quarter-final stage, and then they look pretty unstoppable after that, both in an attacking sense and a defensive sense. So I think they have to be favourites. I know like Opta have put England as mild favourites, but I don't really see why England should be the number one favourite, especially given the injuries that England are contending with. And then I think you've got Germany as hosts, I think, have to be considered. I think Portugal, the kind of form that they're in and the quality that they've got from front to back, I think is really, really special. And they faltered a bit at the last World Cup, but you saw those glimpses of what that team can produce, especially when Bruno's on top form. He obviously ended the season on a high as well. Rafa Leao, I think, has a bit of a point to prove on the international stage as well. Ronaldo, potentially his last tournament. So I think you've got those 4. And then I guess after that, Spain certainly have a shout. Yeah, I think it's those five really. I can't really see it falling out of those five unless, say, an Italy or a Netherlands were to cause a bit of an upset. But I just don't see them at that level at this moment in time. So after rambling for a little bit and bigging up France, I'm gonna put it out there and say that England are going to win it.
Really?
Yeah, why not? I just think that I'm obviously going with heart a little bit overhead here.
Did you say this ahead of Qatar as well? Was it you and
No,
Joe
I didn't say it
Qatar?
ahead of Qatar. I think I put Argentina ahead of Qatar, but I did put England ahead of Euro 2020. I just think when your nation is among the favourites, and I think England are among the two. Yeah, probably among the two favourites, along with France, maybe the top three, along with Portugal and Germany, or one of those two. I just think you've got to back them. I think you do have to back the boys, and I think, yes, the defence is a worry. The defence is a
pretty
worry.
Big worry.
It's a big worry. Shaw has played made one start. Hasn't made a start since mid-February. Harry Maguire hasn't made a start since April. I think John Stones has only made one start since April.
I think that was the FA Cup final as well.
Yeah, so you look at that. Obviously, by the time you're watching this, England will have played their final friendly before the tournament. But against Bosnia, it was a starting back four of Konsa, Dunk, Gehi and Trippier. Yeah, I think at least two centre-backs will get the chop before the tournament. They may well have already done so already. I know Jones and Maddison, as we're filming this, are already out, and I back those choices. But yeah, left-back's a worry. But then I just think, in terms of the attack, and I know tournaments are often, not necessarily won just on the attack. Well, they aren't. But the attack is just so good.
Yeah,
I think the attacking level is clearly the best at the tournament. I was looking at players who've ranked highest for just goals and assists. I know it's a very base level stat, but in terms of pure form going into this tournament, England have by far the best attackers at their disposal. I think 3 of the top 6 most productive players in Europe's top 5 leagues this year were English. Obviously, Harry Kane, Cole Palmer and Ollie Watkins. I think that goes up to 6 in terms of the top 20 most productive players in Europe. I've got them down here. Sorry, not very professional of me, but
Kane,
Bellingham. Saka, Foden and Bellingham also make up the top 20. The only other nation to have more than 2 representatives in the top 20 most productive attackers in Europe last season were Norway. Mbappé was France's only representative. When you go a bit further down, Haaland and Sorloth, who were both in the top 10, to be fair.
But they're not there.
They're not there, exactly. So England's only competitor. But it's interesting when you kind of go further down the list. You got the likes of Giroud and Griezmann, who of course also had great seasons, but they're on par with kind of Jared Bowen, Anthony Gordon, Dominic Solanke, who didn't even make the England squad. So yeah, in terms of pure output, in terms of pure kind of form and confidence going into this tournament, it's really, really hard to look past England's attack. And, if you have Kane, Saka, Foden and Bellingham on top form in this tournament, that attack is going to be so hard to stop. So I will back the boys. Ultimately, I think the expectation has to be at least a semi-final here, right? Anything less than a semi-final, I think, is a bit of a failure for England, given that if they win their group, the draw could open up quite nicely for England. Obviously, France will probably await in the semi-final, and then it's just who's better on the day. France would go into that as favourites, no doubt. And if England don't win the group, then big problems as well, because it would probably be Germany in the last 16, looking to get revenge for Wembley 3 years ago. So yeah, this England team is not without its problems, but if they win the group, I'm pretty confident they get to the semis. And then if I guess the one thing that I'm a bit buoyed with about France is the fact that it doesn't look like Saliba's going to be starting centre back, with Upamecano and Konate preferred Obviously, they have history at
Leipzig
Leipzig.
history,
They were a good partnership there, but I just I think anyone will say like Saliba is a better centre back than Upamecano at this moment in time,
and Konate.
But particularly Upamecano, particularly off the back of the last 2 seasons. And in some ways, it feels like maybe an injury to one of those two could be a bit of a saving grace for France in the same way as that injury was it to Luca Hernandez at the start of the thing with Theo Hernandez coming in. It was that first game against Australia where France looked really, really poor up until that injury, and then Theo Hernandez coming on really just transformed them, and I think was a bit of a game changer for the tournament. That's the one thing that's the only kind of bit of hope with France, because obviously France have a much deeper and better back line than England at this moment in time. But if Deschamps is willing to bench Saliba and continues to do so, and problems arise from that, then yeah, that's where I see them coming out the stuck. But I'm assuming you've gone for France.
Well, I thought you were going to go with France, so I didn't go with France. I mean, everyone knows about the strength of the French squad, so I'm actually pleased that I'm not profiling them, to be honest. I mean, I think they've been, as you say, kind of favourites for every tournament they've entered since 2016. They've actually only won one, which I think does go to show that this favourites tag, people get a bit swept up in.
But to make
amazing performances
so consistently is impressive. I think, to be honest, let's face it, I think Brazil have probably been the favourites at every single World Cup. Bar maybe 1 or 2 for the last 20 years, and they've failed to make it past the quarterfinals of most stages.
But my point is, for England fans getting carried away, or people getting so swept up with the supercomputer putting England as favourites, like, just chill out.
For sure.
When you've got the weight of failure that we've been through in recent years, like this favourites tag, I don't think it really matters for a side like England who haven't been there yet. So I'd have England up there. I think they are probably third favourite in my eyes. I think I'd probably have Germany just ahead of them because of home advantage. But if Germany get off to a slow start, then I think that could be quite difficult. Nagelsmann's relatively new in the door there. But I actually have gone with the Portuguese as my favourites.
Wow.
I think
so France are down in 4th then?
No, France are the best team in the tournament, and I expect them to win it. I'd be shocked if they didn't. But the team I wanted to profile is Portugal, and I think they've got a very decent chance of making a final, to be honest. I mean, you look at what they did in qualifying, 10 out of 10. I think they scored 35 goals in those 10 games. They only conceded 2. I think that was the best attack in qualifying. It was the best defence in qualifying. And that is classic Roberto Martinez, because he used to do that with Belgium every qualifying campaign. But the experience gained at Belgium, I think it was 80 games in charge of Belgium, multiple tournaments there in charge of that side, taking them to 3rd in 2018, took them to the quarterfinals in Euro 2020. Some huge performances in that run. In the last Euros, knocking out Portugal in the last 16. Belgium have a very decent chance. Portugal have a very decent chance with a manager like Roberto Martinez in charge, who's been there in major tournaments in a different way that Nagelsmann doesn't really have in any international experience. Southgate's sort of struggled in the latter parts of tournaments. It feels like Roberto Martinez, with that much weight of experience under his belt, I think they'll be a threat. And also, you just look at the depth of their squad, pretty much all across the entire squad. Like England, we talk about their backline. Portugal have 5 really outstanding centre-backs. 4 really. I mean, Danilo Pereira is not an outstanding centre-back. But when you're choosing between Pepe, Ruben Dias, Inacio and Antonio Silva, and then at left-back you've got Cancelo or Nuno Mendes. At right-back you've got Diogo Dalot. You could play Cancelo on the right or Nelson Semedo. In midfield you've got João Palhinha as the pivot in that side, allowing Vitinha and Bruno Fernandes in front to cause a lot of damage. You could even play Bernardo Silva in there. You could play João Neves, Ruben Neves. The midfield is stacked, and then the front line, you've got Cristiano Ronaldo, you've got Diogo Jota, Rafa Leão, Pedro Neto. There is so much quality in that front line, and actually at the last World Cup it ended up with Gonçalo Ramos leading the line there, and he scored that hat-trick against Switzerland in the last 16. I just feel like this Portuguese squad is going under the radar, and actually won Euro 2016 with a far worse squad,
much worse squad.
And the fact that Cristiano Ronaldo, look, I wouldn't be surprised if he was a bit more of a bit part player this tournament, but the fact this is his 6th Euros, and the season that he's come off in Saudi Arabia, and yes, it is Saudi Arabian, a different level of football, and doesn't stand up to the top 5 leagues, but he's coming in full of confidence, and he will not want to end his international career how it went at the 2022 World Cup, where he was quite frankly embarrassed by being dropped. And it was the right decision, but he is not the sort of character to take that well.
And he
also entered the
2022 World Cup out of form, out of fate, you know, on the bench at Man United, you know, the kind of, you know, there was so much toxicity around him at the time. And you talk about Saudi Arabia, but it's like, it's not like he's coming into the Champions League off the back of a season in Saudi Arabia. Like, I don't think the level of club football in Saudi Arabia, like, you know, international football just isn't the same level. He's a tournament specialist, isn't he? And yeah, like Pepe there as well. You know, yeah, the blend of, like, you know, serious experience there with, well, I mean, yeah, I think there's good experience all across the squad, but like with players like Antonio Silva in there as well, there is a really particularly good blend about this Portugal team.
Feels very balanced. It feels like really the weakest position's probably right wing, because Pedro Neto, you know, had so many injury issues. Bernardo Silva's not really favoured on the right wing anymore. Conceição is being picked as their right winger, but other than that, there's 2 outstanding players really in every single position. You know, João Felix being third choice left winger, probably third choice centre forward. You know, that's the sort of calibre of player they're bringing.
But the fact there, if you have Conceição playing on the right wing, then one of Vitinha or Bernardo Silva is going to be starting on the bench most likely, and so one of them is going to be able to be brought on at some stage in the game. It is really, really tasty. I guess that's where England have a real advantage, is that their front 4 you can really mix and match really, really nicely.
And I did it for one of the FD Snapchats the other day, ranking who had the hardest and easiest groups by FIFA ranking, and total them all up, divided by 4, etc. And Portugal, of all the favourites, have by far the easiest group. I think it's Czechia, Turkey and Georgia, who are first-time Euros. So they could really build up a sort of head of steam by the end of the group stage. And then from there, with that level of attacking depth, with that quality in attacking positions, I think they could be really, really difficult to stop. And I think the only thing really counting against them is the fact that Roberto Martinez probably hasn't got over the line, maybe did slightly underachieve with Belgium at different points. Yeah. But I think this squad is more balanced than Belgium's ever was, particularly in defensive areas. You know, there is so much young talent coming through with Inacio and Silva, etc., that it shouldn't feel like Belgium was slightly undermined by Vertonghen and Alderweireld maybe ageing out sooner than other members of their squad, and they didn't really have that depth in defence. They never had the same calibre of fullbacks either. I think this Portuguese squad is really well-rounded, and they are my tip.
I think Belgium also had the golden generation tag kind of put on them, and I think there was a certain pressure around that. It just never seemed to go right for them. And whereas this Portugal team has gone out and won it before and won it ugly in 2016. They will be great to watch.
So we are backing England and Portugal. No one's backing France officially, but we kind of both are. Right, we've got plenty to get through. Mikey, top scorer.
I mean, on the subject of France, this was a really easy one. I wasn't going to go with. It is Kylian Mbappé. I think.
Same.
Like, you know, he's
best goal scorer in Europe. Good mood.
Well, not best goal scorer in Europe. Sorry, Harry Kane's the best goal scorer in Europe. But, you know what I mean. Best player in Europe. Best goal scorer probably over the last few years in Europe.
Tournament experience killed it. Well.
Sorry, Haaland's probably been a better goal scorer over the last few years. But you know what I mean. His record in international tournaments is scary. You know, like, I think only Ronaldo has scored as many goals as him in a single World Cup since Gerd Müller in 1970. Obviously 8 at the last tournament. I think he scored 30 goals for France between 2021 and 2023. He's already, I think, 11 off Giroud as their all-time top scorer. There's a possibility that he could become France's all-time top scorer by the end of this year, or even by the end of this tournament, if Giroud doesn't feature too much. He is just such a beast in tournaments. And, you know, in terms of his Euros record as well, I think he'll be really keen to
put things right.
Banish the ghosts of 2021, when, of course, he missed that penalty against Switzerland, which I think is still one of the greatest games of football I've ever seen. Just a ridiculous game. And then, of course, got the move to Real Madrid in the bag as well. He's going to be absolutely
flying. That was my factor, that I just think he's going to be in such a good mood. You know, he was talking about, you know, it was actually Verratti the other day calling PSG a bit of a prison, and clearly he'd had a huge falling out with Nasser Al-Khelaifi. He was saying that Luis Campos and Luis Enrique really saved him, because Nasser Al-Khelaifi didn't want him to play at all last year. So that shows the sort of stress he was under at points during that season. Very much should also be relatively fresh, because Luis Enrique kept benching him or pulling him off. He hasn't played a huge amount of football. I think he could come in really, really in a great mood. I was close to going with Giroud as well, but I'm not sure whether Marcus Thuram or Colomwani will now start over Giroud. But yeah, Mbappe feels like the obvious pick.
Yeah. I think so. Obviously, Harry Kane's up there as well. You never know. Ronaldo, if he plays enough, is up there as well. But
I have an outside shout as well. So Romelu Lukaku. Belgium have a really easy group as they go.
14 goals didn't he score?
14 goals in qualifying. Who've they got? Romania, Slovakia and Ukraine in the group. He could quite easily score a hat-trick in one of those games. And then you're pretty much, the top scorers in the last tournament all finished with 5 goals. I think it was Benzema, Mbappe, not Mbappe, Morata and Cristiano Ronaldo. So Lukaku could easily hoover that up.
Hat-tricks do seal it as well. I think like Mbappe's hat-trick in the World Cup final sealed it for him. Harry Kane's brilliant hat-trick against Panama sealed it for him in 2018.
Use that ankle where you need to.
Okay, so we're pretty set on that. I think we might be in agreement for our next one as well. But should we go through flops, basically?
Yeah. I think it's a bit harsh, but I did want to pick out someone from the group of death, which actually, I was talking about that Snapchat. By rankings, it's not actually the hardest group. The hardest group is actually France's group, as in that's got the lowest ranked teams in it by FIFA rankings, the France, Austria, Netherlands and Poland one. But with Spain, Croatia, Italy, Albania, I mean, pour a drink out for Albania. That's a tough draw.
They're done, aren't
but
they?
It feels like one of the big boys. I mean, Croatia aren't such a big boy, but the way they performed in international tournaments in recent years suggests that they deserve a lot of respect. But it feels like Italy are the most likely of those of Spain and Italy to sort of crumble at that stage. They've had a horrendous run of injuries. I think it's now 7 players that would probably be picked in their 26-man squad that are now missing. Big name players as well, like a Cherby, Destiny Odoji,
Scalvini,
Berardi, Scalvini picking up that injury on the final game of the season, where I think Spalletti's likely to be furious with Gasperini. There was nothing really riding on it. They could only finish 1 point. They could only finish 1 place higher up. So yeah, he'll be incredibly frustrated by that. But Italy, it feels like they blow incredibly hot and cold at international tournaments as well. Recently, actually, their Euros record's been a lot more impressive than the World Cup. I mean, haven't played in a World Cup since 2014, which is pretty staggering. But it's not just the injuries, it's the amount of quality from the Euro 2020 squad that has now left. No more Bonucci, no more Chiellini, no more Verratti, Insigne, Immobile. These are big players for Italy. And Spalletti's only been in the door for, 7-8 games? It feels like it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to get up to speed with his style of play. And I just think they have flop potential.
Yeah, I did actually go for the same. We didn't consult on this before. If we had, I would have picked someone different for sure. But I think Italy, there is something about Italy that makes them a bit of an outlier when it comes to all the big teams. Like, I think another one you could put in here potentially is the Netherlands.
They were my second pick.
They have continually underperformed at major tournaments. I know they gave Argentina a great fight at the World Cup, but they weren't exactly overly convincing in the build-up to that. And yes, they have a great squad, but it still feels like the Netherlands are waiting to fall on the perfect kind of Dutch legend to actually lead them to a final. I'm just not sure about it with the current crop. They just haven't shown quite enough over the last few years to suggest they'll go deep.
He's also made some quite interesting selection calls. Joshua Zirkzee wasn't picked, which, given their struggles for a centre forward, seems like a big call. Ian Maatsen wasn't picked as well. I mean, they do have so much quality at the back. That's what I would say about the Netherlands.
Yeah,
they could really grind their way
to
pretty deep.
I do think Ian Maatsen, I think that's a big oversight, to be honest, especially given the end of his season. But, I mean, back on Italy, you talk about the injuries. The depth at the back is a worry. I think you've got, that last tournament was so built on the defensive solidity that Bonucci and Chiellini offered, and they've obviously played together for years, and that experience, you saw it in the final in particular. Like they knew how to dig deep. I don't know if Spalletti teams dig deep in the same way as Mancini teams generally. Like Spalletti is a bit more of an expansive manager. I think they've been playing a bit more of an expansive style since he's come in, even though he has favoured a back 3. Don't know if that's going to be as suited for this squad in a tournament. But I was looking in their back line, and Di Lorenzo and Darmian can play in a back three. But aside from them, the only other centre-backs in the squad with over 3 caps for their country are Mancini and Bastoni. And Bastoni's got 23, Mancini's got 13 caps. Mancini's got 13 caps despite playing every year since 2019, so he's never been that in favour, at 28 years old. Calafiori, is in the squad off the back of a great season at Bologna, but he only won his first cap against Turkey on the weekend, or at least he was in the provisional squad. I don't know if he'll make the final squad. It's just, Raul Bellanova could start at right wing back at points. He's only got 1 cap, and maybe I'm going back on myself a little bit. Maybe I'm contradicting myself a little bit here because England have similar. Similar defensive issues that I've been willing to kind of skirt over, but the difference with Italy is that they don't really have a top goal scorer in there either.
And they're not playing Scamacca at the moment.
Not playing Scamacca at the moment. I feel like he may well come back in for the start of this tournament.
Apparently, he's been playing too much COD.
But that's what Spalletti has bemoaned, hasn't he?
Yeah.
What does he say that COD?
We should go focusing enough on the camps, etc.
Yeah, something like we're living in we're living in the wrong era or something. He's just being a bit of a grumpy old man about it. But Barella is their top scorer on 9, like in total.
In their squad,
in their squad. If Harry Maguire was in the Italy squad, for example, he'd be their second top scorer, which just goes to show how little experience there really is in this Italy squad, despite it not necessarily being the youngest squad. There just is a lack of experience, a lack of goals. Chiesa had a really brilliant Euro 2020, but since then has been plagued by injuries, and Locatelli's out of this squad as well. Of course, Verratti's not in this squad. They really are missing a spine. I back Donnarumma to have a really strong tournament, and I think if they are going to make any progress, it's going to come down to him. I worry in a number of other areas, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, people forget he was player of the tournament in Euro 2020 as well. He's really stepped up for Italy on other occasions. Let's move on to dark horses. I went with Ukraine. I like their group, as I've already said. I think they've got a very decent chance of finishing second behind Belgium, ahead of Slovakia, and who else is it? Romania. But also recent results. I think it suggests how solid they are. I mean, they've drawn with England, they've drawn with Italy, they've drawn with Germany twice since the World Cup. And they've got some players that are coming into this tournament in really good form. I mean, Lunin's been exceptional for Real Madrid this season. I don't think many people saw that. Artem Dovbyk finishing as the top scorer in La Liga. Siankov as well at Girona, his teammate, had a brilliant season. And then you're looking at some wild card options as well. I feel like Mikhailo Mudryk will have I feel like he has the potential to have a really decent tournament.
Scored the goal that got them into the tournament as well. That
Absolutely.
Final.
And like that pace on the break, if they're going to sit quite deep, and they might do, because they've got some quality centre-backs and they don't necessarily have the most energetic, fresh midfield, let's say. Stepanenko's a great player and a great destroyer in the middle of the park, but they probably are going to sit quite deep. I mean, it is the strength of Ukraine to get bodies behind the ball and use that pace up top. I think they could cause some damage as well. And you look at Mikolenko as a left back, you look at Malinovsky, could score a wonder goal from somewhere. There's talent in this squad, and I like the way they are placed for this tournament. Yes, they did have to come through the playoffs and beat Iceland in the playoff final, but people forget that they got the same amount of points in qualifying as Italy, only didn't go through on the basis of a head-to-head record, and that was during an entire qualifying campaign where they couldn't play matches at home because of everything that's going on in Ukraine, which is another factor as well. The motivation they have in terms of representing their country right now could not be higher because of this, disgusting ongoing invasion and war going on at the hands of Russia. So Ukraine are going to be fully motivated. I think they've got players coming off a great season, and from recent results suggest that they don't really fear anyone.
Yeah, and they will have a huge support from the neutral there as well. So that there will be a lift there. But yeah, I agree. Like a really exciting squad there. I have gone for. I was originally tempted to be a little bit controversial and go for Belgium as my dark horse, because I feel like finally Belgium can be considered dark horses again. I think for the last 10 years, putting Belgium as a dark horse has been silly because of but it's coming into a new era. You know, Courtois isn't in the squad anymore. You know, Hazard's out of the picture. You know, it's a slightly new Belgium squad. However, and also, you know, you got the likes of Doku, Bakayoko, Openda in there. Like, there's a nice mix of youth and experience and players who are coming into either their first or second tournament, or their first tournament as a starter at least. I think they do have a really good chance of going deep. Tedesco's unbeaten since taking over as well. Like, there's a lot of good signs around this Belgium side.
Feels quite like England, that it's quite top heavy maybe. Like,
yeah,
their forward line is stacked,
it is top
and
heavy,
maybe their back line less so.
For sure. But they're still ranked third in the world by FIFA, and for that reason alone, I can't pick them at all. And I'll go for a more interesting pick anyway. It's one who a few people have been talking about going into this tournament, Austria.
Nice.
And again, you know, there are
your favourite Ralf Rangnick.
There, exactly, yeah. What a man! What a man! What a legacy that guy has. Seriously, what a legacy that guy has. I'm not, you know, from a United perspective, obviously joking, but yeah, like, he has, you know, to come off the back of, you know, what was certainly his probably most the most frustrating period in his coaching career, at least. I know obviously his career has, you know, seen him take up multiple positions at different clubs, but in terms of his coaching career, you know, those 6 months, 7 months at Man United were incredibly frustrating for him. But to come off the back of that straight into this Austria job in the summer of 2022, and almost instantly transformed them, yeah, I think they have to be considered a really, really strong side going into this tournament. I think it was something like they were getting attendances of around 18,000 before he came in. Such was the poor level of football and that fans were seeing, and now nearly 50,000 people are turning up to see Austria. So yeah, like, he has it's a bit of a perfect storm as well. You know, he's come into a squad which is there are quite a few players in the squad who have been either through the Red Bull system or currently play at a Red Bull club, and was able to fairly quickly implement a very high energy, high press system, which, at least in qualifying and in the Nations League and in friendlies, has worked really, really well. And I also think in a group like this, which is, you know, probably, yeah, the group of death. It's one of the two groups of death, I think, you know, with the Netherlands, France and Poland, I think could cause some problems. I think this Austria team, like, I can very much see Austria going and holding France 1-1 when they play them. Like, I can see that happening. That feels like a kind of Euros
kind
group
of shock
result.
Everyone wants,
like, yeah, like, it just feels, and who knows, Austria may be the better team in that game and maybe should win it. You know, like, that's what it feels like to me. I guess the caveats are Xaver Schlager has been ruled out with an ACL tear. Obviously, David Alaba isn't at the tournament either. First choice keeper Alexander Schlager also out with an ACL. So they are missing some key players. However, there is still a really promising core there, and because they are so tied to Rangnick's style of play, one or two key personnel missing doesn't necessarily, that's not going to disrupt that side in, say, the same way that, I don't know, even I'm trying to think. Say Rodri missing for Spain would disrupt them. A Declan Rice missing for England would disrupt them, or a Kane missing for England, or a Van Dijk missing for the Netherlands. Like I think they have shown, a real kind of team spirit under Rangnick, which I think supersedes that. So yeah, I can see them coming through that group, and I kind of look back to the last World Cup with Japan coming through that group with Germany and Spain. I look back to the previous Euros where Hungary, even though they didn't make it through, gave a really good account of themselves against the likes of Germany and Portugal. And yeah, it feels like this Austria team could do something, and it's pretty mad. I was looking at their record in tournaments, and they haven't made a World Cup since 1998.
Wow.
And in that time since 1998, they've only qualified for 2 Euros tournaments, which were
One
the
of
last
which was-
two, 2016 and 2020, and then
Were they not joint hosts?
They were joint hosts in 2008. So like that doesn't count for me. But in terms of actually having to qualify, they've only done it for the previous two, which of course was when qualification opened up with the increase in teams at the Euros. So yeah, it feels like it feels like they could make it through this group, and then if they do finish runners up in this group, which I'm backing them to do over the Netherlands potentially, then they would have probably Slovakia, Romania, or your boys Ukraine in the last 16, and that would be one of the. Yeah, I mean, especially if it's Austria versus Ukraine, that would
Battle
be a really, really tasty tie. And I think key to their success will be their midfield. I think that's where they're strongest. You've got Seiwald and Baumgartner, both at Leipzig, Seiwald previously at Salzburg. You've got Sabitzer and Lima, of course, who came through the Red Bull system as well. And, especially with Sabitzer and Lima, you've seen over the years how brilliant they are at being able to perform very specific roles for the system. You saw Sabitzer in the Champions League final, what he was able to do, but he's played across the midfield and even in the forward line over the course of his career. Lima, one of Bayern's standout players in their Champions League run, absolutely brilliant. And then you've got other players like Stefan Poch, who's had a brilliant second season at Bologna. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be hopeful about with this Austria side, but yeah, much will depend if they need to finish second in this group, and then I think they've got a real shot at getting to the quarters.
Okay, love it. So we've done the kind of team ones. Now we've got some individual ones. We've got surprise star, player of the tournament, best under 21 player, and then I brought forward a little shock story to watch out for as well. But surprise star, I've already kind of mentioned him. I won't go into. I've actually got two. Mykhailo Mudryk, I think, could be a surprise star. I don't think anyone's really expecting him. But if Ukraine, as I suggest, are going to be one of the surprises of the tournament, I think Mudryk could have a really, really... I mean, international football feels like it's made for someone like Mykhailo Mudryk. Doesn't need... his physical gifts mean that whatever's going on tactically in a game, he's kind of always a threat, even though he has been known to waste opportunities. And in the last 5 games of the season, he played really well for Chelsea. It's got to be said. Played really, really well. In fact, I think 16% of his XG from the entire season came in the final 5 games. So it does show that he was really starting to step up for Chelsea. My other shout is Giorgio Mamardashvili of Georgia, goalkeeper. 23 years old, 6'6", has had a phenomenal season for Valencia. I think he's missed 1 league games in the last 2 seasons. This year, saved over 10 XG for Valencia. Really helped them to a really solid mid-table finish. Only Di Gregorio, who's just signed for Juventus, and Gianluigi Donnarumma prevented more XG in the entirety of Europe. Georgia, Kavisha and Kvaratskhelia at the other end of the pitch, but Mamardashvili is going to be busy, I think, in that group, with Portugal in there. He has the potential to make 3 or 4 fantastic saves against Portugal and become a bit of a cult hero. Look, a surprise start. It might only be for the group stages. It might only be for 3 games. But this is a guy who's now being linked with Newcastle. It could really raise his profile. I think, he's my shock star to watch out for. Who was yours, Mike?
Nice. Seems like we've spoken about him already. And maybe I'm cheating a little bit, but I think Romelu Lukaku could finally have the tournament that his career deserves on the international stage. I know he was decent at the 2018 World Cup, but he didn't necessarily put up, a huge amount of goals. But massive in qualifying. In a relatively easy group as well that you very much back Belgium to get out of. And he also comes into this tournament in quietly good form. 21 goals for Roma this season, I think, in 47 games. His record for Belgium, is second to none. 83 goals and 115 caps. Is really pretty remarkable. A pretty remarkable return. And yes, like we were talking about before, Belgium have classically been great in qualifying and really put teams away there. But I just think Lukaku has a point to prove at this tournament. Coming off a decent season as well, may well be his final tournament as Belgium's number 1 striker. At least he's not aging out that much. But
he's been saying this week about how attractive Saudi Arabia is as well. So it feels like he might move there at some stage.
Could be on the way out in that sense too. I think he scored or assisted in all but 1 game since that infamous Croatia game at the 2022 World Cup, where he put up, what was it, like 4 XG, 3 XG by himself?
Brutal, wasn't it?
I think he put up more XG than Belgium had as a team in the entire group. And yeah, should have scored a hat-trick, and missed about 2 open goals or something. So yeah, less said about that the better, but I feel like I feel like he'll have the bit between his teeth off the back of that, because that was quite a humiliating night for him. And I think he was kind of I think he was kind of unfairly criticised in some ways after that.
Nice.
So I think Lukaku's going to have a big tournament. I had some other suggestions. Kvicha for Georgia. Not that it would be that much of a surprise, but I think he could be really entertaining in the group stage. Milos Kerkesh for Hungary at left
United
wing back. The Bournemouth left back. He's become a really important player for Hungary as a wing back, and actually we've not mentioned Hungary so far, but they've been a lot of people's dark horses. It's hard. I feel like they're, I don't know, I just don't have as much confidence in them as I do, say, Austria.
Never enthused by them stylistically. It's never brilliant football to watch.
But then they were quietly quite effective at the last Euros. Like, I think they could
beat England in the run-up to the World Cup.
I backed them to make it through that group. It's just I think a lot of people are backing them to get second and then potentially make the quarterfinals. And maybe they will, but I think I'm just slightly scarred by all the Turkey shouts at Euro 2020, because that didn't end well.
People went hot on that,
and it feels like Hungary are like potentially the Turkey of this tournament. Weirdly, Turkey are almost certainly going to do a lot better at this tournament than they did in the last. But we don't have time to discuss them.
Who would be your player of the tournament?
Player of the tournament. Okay, so going off who I'm backing to win the tournament.
England, yeah.
If England win the tournament, which I'm saying that they will, I think it's going to be Harry Kane. I think Harry Kane, obviously he's had more than his fair share of praise this season, but I feel like at major tournaments there's usually been someone else who's kind of taken the headlines, whether that be Raheem Sterling at Euro 2020, rightly considered England's best player.
Saka, Jude Bellingham at the World Cup.
Jude Bellingham at the last World Cup. Yeah, Saka as well. Even Saka at Euro 2020 was absolutely brilliant when he played. It feels like there needs to be a tournament where Harry Kane really is the one, and it may well be his last. It is his best shot. At winning a major tournament at this point, coming off a brilliant season, and I just think that forward line now is so suited to him. You've got Foden, Bellingham, and Saka all coming off by far the best seasons of their careers, at least in terms of goal scoring. And you've got a player in Kane who loves to drop deep and create space for other players in the attack. Like, it feels like I'm sure he will grab a few goals, but it feels like more than ever, got Cole Palmer coming off the bench as well, who's so good in the final third. It feels like more than ever, Kane will have the ability to do what he loves to do, and will have three world-class players running off him.
My only concern with that is this is what a lot of people were saying on the back of Bosnia as well. Like, have England made a mistake not picking a Marcus Rashford, who is more likely to stretch play a bit? Like, it could get quite condensed.
Yeah.
Especially if Foden starts on the left. He wants to come into central areas, then you've already got Jude Bellingham there. Saka can go play wider, of course. But it feels like England's play, especially with Trippier likely to start at left back, it could all get quite narrow and quite bunched, but there's so much quality in there. Yeah,
that is true. Like, stylistically it could become an issue, but then equally, like, do you just adapt to that? Like, I know Foden likes to cut in and everything, but like, we've seen it this season, like, he is also great at getting on the end of balls in the box. Like, his touch is so good. Like, I don't know, like, England breaking and Kane spraying a 40-yard pass to Foden, who then takes a touch past a right back and slots home. Like, I think that's, like, I can see those kinds of moves happening. So I think, nevertheless, if England are going to win it, like, I think he's going to play a major role. I think,
Fair enough. I mean, I look back on who's previously won player of the tournament. It was Donnarumma, then Griezmann, Iniesta and Xavi, which suggests that you've got to get to the final to be in with a shout. I back Portugal. my player of the tournament,
Bruno.
It's Bruno Fernandes.
Yep.
It's Bruno Fernandes. He had an exceptional World Cup, and because they unfortunately got knocked out 1-0 by Morocco in the quarterfinals, it kind of went under the radar. But he scored twice and got 3 assists in 4 games. Pretty remarkable stuff.
Yeah.
Finished the season really strongly with United, and I feel like, unlike with United, he's got so much of a better balance in that midfield. If it's João, Palhinha and Vitinha sort of doing a lot of the dog work behind him, Vitinha is a very good link player but is not going to be taking the long shots. It feels like it's going to be funneled to get Bruno Fernandes in great areas. The issue is, if they start with Cristiano Ronaldo, he's likely to maybe take more pot shots. He's not going to stretch defence in the same way that Bruno Fernandes does. But I still think there's enough threat in behind with Pedro Neto and Rafa Leao that there could be a lot of space for Bruno Fernandes. And I do think, as I talked about earlier, they've got a really good group. I think he could start to really build up a head of steam in this tournament. My other suggestion was Jude Bellingham. I feel like people are so hot on him right now, rightly so, because of his performances this year for Real Madrid. And the English press love to really make one player the sort of talking point of an entire Euros, and put all the pressure, not necessarily all the pressure, but all the praise really on one player. And it feels like this is potentially Jude Bellingham's tournament. And if England go far, I can really see a tidal wave of public support behind him. And I can see him, being nominated for Player of the Year as well. So they were my 2 shouts. For Best Under-21 Player, looking back, it's only actually been in existence for the last 2 tournaments. Pedri won it in 2020 in that amazing season where he played about 80 games and looked absolutely exhausted by the end of it, because he then went to play the Olympics, I think, afterwards. Renato Sanchez won it before. I've gone with Lamine Yamal. Did you go as well?
Yeah. I think him or Bellingham, because Bellingham still qualifies for it.
It's crazy, though. I feel like Yamal, just because he's 16, he will become the youngest player to ever play in the Euros as soon as he steps onto a pitch at this tournament. If you're 16 and you have 2 or 3 good games, the respect you get throughout Europe, the way the press talk about you, and rightly so. He was exceptional this year for Spain. And I think Spain, we haven't really mentioned them as one of the favourites. They've kind of gone in a similar way to Portugal, maybe slightly under the radar going to this tournament. But there's a lot of players in there who have had seriously good seasons. You look at Lamine Yamal, you look at Nico Williams on the other side, you look at Joselu down the middle, even though it's more likely to be Morata, but Mikel Merino, Alex Garcia, Rodri in the centre of the park, Alex Grimaldo as a left wing back or left back, Carvajal at right back. There's so many players in there that have had excellent seasons. Their issue is they probably lack an outstanding centre back at the moment, and they probably lack an outstanding forward at the moment. But I think Spain could be a big threat in this tournament. And Lamine Yamal, I think it can see him winning Young Player of the Year quite easily. Yeah,
I think Lamine Yamal, it's one of those ones where obviously plays for one of the 2 biggest clubs in the world in Barcelona, so eyeballs have been on him already. But I think once the wider football public who haven't necessarily been watching Barcelona week in, week out this season see what a 16-year-old is capable of, which is, I would probably say, is the most... I can't remember, in my kind of football watching life, I can't remember really seeing a 16-year-old do what Yamal has done this season on a consistent basis. At all.
Rodri was more... not Rodri. Rooney was more fits and starts, wasn't he, at 16?
Yeah, he was. He had his moments, but... and obviously playing in a far, less expansive team as well. But, when people see that, I think, it will be, it could be mass hysteria with Yamal, especially if Spain also back it up and go deep in this tournament. You talk about forwards, I don't know, I also feel like this could be a tournament for Morata. Scored 3 times, was it, at the World Cup? Mm-hmm. He's got the captain's armband now as well. He's got that responsibility, and I think he's grown into it. And he has enjoyed a good 2 years at Atleti as well, Morata. I think Spain. I think aside from those 4 that we've kind of been talking about a lot, I think Spain are the next ones there, and may well get to the semis. I think they might be playing. They would be due to play Germany in the quarterfinals if they won that group. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where they would end up. I guess back to player of the tournament very quickly. I think if Germany were to win it, I think there'd be such a clamour for Toni Kroos to get the award. I think Toni Kroos then would become, I think, maybe the front runner for Ballon d'Or. Maybe. I think that the sentiment around him finishing his career on such a high with that Real Madrid season, I think, probably the man of the match in my eyes in the Champions League final. If he was to then play a key role in Germany winning it, I think the clamour would just be deafening. It would be absolutely deafening. But yeah, I was kind of thinking here, maybe Gundogan as well. I feel like he would probably have a big tournament for Germany to go far in that more advanced role.
From what I see from people chatting on Twitter, Gundogan's a bit unsure of his place. Even though he is captain at the moment, there are debates about whether he slows down their play a little bit. But
yeah, but I mean, I think if you've got Musiala and Wirtz to your left and right, then do you have to be the quickest player in the centre? Can you not just be a bit more of a conduit? Like, I don't know. I'm not sure if it would be as big an issue for me personally.
Outside bet for top scorer, Super Kai Havertz.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Finished the season that strongly as well, and they are going to create so many chances.
Yeah.
Even in the last World Cup, they did get knocked out in the group stages, but the chances they created, I think it was the highest XG in the entirety of the group stages. So Germany will be up there. Did you have anything else to add, Mikey, before I do my shock story?
That was it. Just Wirtz and Musiala again as shouts for young player. Like again, if Germany make the final, like I can see both of those players having like really tremendous tournaments. Keeping Sane out of the side as it stands. I know you are really keen to tell me your shock story. I don't have a shock story. Like we discussed this before, I was struggling to think of one. What is going to happen at this tournament, Dukes?
Okay, I've looked into my crystal ball, and I've looked into the ridiculous section of the crystal ball. I think Neuer and Nagelsmann could have real beef in this tournament. They've got history. Yeah. They've got history. When Neuer was Bayern Munich coach, Neuer, after the World Cup, goes skiing, breaks his leg. In the time that he's out, Nagelsmann decides to fire his best man at his wedding and also goalkeeping coach called Tony Tapalovic.
Who had been at Bayern for what, like 10, 15 years?
Years and years, part of the furniture. Yeah. Nagelsmann said, see you later. Neuer comes out and says, he's absolutely heartbroken by this. It looked like Neuer might even leave Bayern Munich at one stage. Nagelsmann obviously gets fired before the end of the season. There's huge falling outs with Müller. There's fallings out with Neuer. Awkward that they're both going to this World Cup and will probably play reasonably large parts. March this year, it feels like Nagelsmann takes over. They're asking, what's the situation with Neuer? They've obviously got ter Stegen there, very able backup. I'll get into it in a second, but arguably had a better season than Neuer as well. And Nagelsmann said, Neuer's my man. I was watching the highlights of them play against Turkey the other night. It was a 0-0 draw. And it gets to the final minute, and Nagelsmann, sorry, not Nagelsmann, it'd be weird if he was playing, Neuer runs way outside of his box, tries to chip the striker, and fluffs it. It's the through one-on-one, and for some reason the Turkish player completely skews the ball and it goes out of play. But he nearly threw a friendly in the final minutes. German Twitter erupts saying, are we backing the wrong guy here in goal? Does he have that blunder in him? We saw it in the Champions League semi-final. People love to say that Neuer had an excellent season. I think he was solid. I don't think he was brilliant.
His post-shot XG actually wasn't particularly good.
Wasn't great. It was his lowest, and in terms of his save percentage, it was his second lowest of the last 5 years as well. It was under 68%, I think. Ter Stegen wasn't nearly as good as the season before, but I just think he's a more safe pair of hands. There's less blunder in there.
And Neuer's got history at international tournaments as well. You think back to 2018, even 2022, I don't think he was particularly great. I think that is certainly, could certainly be a worry. And back to the Gundogan thing as well, I forget that you could just play Wirtz as the 10 and have Sane on the right.
Sane and Musiala,
that is also
and
really, really tasty.
Robert Andrich further deeper as well. I mean, Nagelsmann's already made some quite interesting selection calls. Not picking Goretzka is a big call as well, given the way he finished the season at Bayern. But it feels like that Goretzka-Kimmich duo has now been cascaded into the rubbish bin of history. But Neuer and Nagelsmann, keep an eye on it throughout the tournament. I'm not saying it will definitely happen, but it would be my shock story.
Love it.
Well, that is our roundup or our preview of the Euros coming up this summer. That got me pretty excited for the tournament, it must be said. Just 5 days to go. Guys, we want to hear from you. Who are your winners, surprise stars, under-21 players of the tournament, etc. All the good stuff. Get it in the comments section. Check us out on Snapchat as well. We drop 3 videos a week on there, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.